What up, guys? Amar here, coming at you with a review of Mexico Night 1. I was not at the show, obviously. I'm still at home, but I couch toured and had some thoughts about some of the stuff that happened last night. So let's kick it off. First tune was Spock's Brain. And me, like most people, probably weren't expecting a bust out right out of the gate. I think the last time Spock's was played was summer 2003 in Camden, 7:30. So it's been a long time since they've played it, and when they started the song, it still didn't quite register. And then Phish came in with that kind of modified Purdy shuffle, the boom 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 boom, and then I knew, I was like, oh, it's got to be Spock's. And they came in with the first line of vocals, and I was like, holy shit, it's happening. I'm a big fan of Spock's Brain. I think it's a super unique song. I've never heard any song that sounded quite like it, even in Phish's catalog. It's pretty unique, and I thought they did a pretty good job with it. So really happy they played that. Hopefully it comes back in rotation. I think it's so much fun to hear and really, really wonky. So big fan. Really glad they played it. Next was Twist, and this one started kind of quiet. It was a little bit reserved, but then the jam started to get going. And at one point, they went into this kind of soupy double time feel, which was really cool. And I thought it was a pretty good twist. Next was Free. So there's this funny moment that I caught in the stream where Twist ends, and then Trey goes over to Phish, and then he's like, all right, let's play Free. And then Mike's looking over at Phish, and he's like, oh, what are we playing? And Phish is like, Free. He kind of like has to exaggeratedly mouth it because they're far enough away that they probably can't hear each other when they talk. So I thought that was pretty funny. Free. So I thought that was great. And Free was good. That's one song that I hear, like I feel like I hear it at almost every show. But of course I'm a fan. And at the end of the first verse, I think it was the first verse, Trey messed up the lyrics a little bit, but we won't hold that against him. One thing that was interesting is in the jam in Free, Mike kind of forced that drop to the B flat a little bit. It sounded like it was a little bit early and no one was quite ready for it. But they made the most of it and it still sounded pretty good. And next was Who Loves the Sun, Velvet Underground cover. I think the last time was played was the only time they ever played it was Halloween '98 when they covered All of Loaded. And I love that album. I think it's brilliant. It's obviously a classic if you're into that kind of stuff. And as soon as they started playing it, I knew it had to be kind of a jab at anyone who was sunburned. And sure enough, Trey at the end of the tune was like, "Oh, that was for all you guys who are sunburned, for the sunburnt among you," which I thought was pretty funny. But in the actual performance of Who Loves the Sun, I thought the vocals were perfect. At least the way it sounded on the stream. Trey's and Paige's harmonies were so on point and it sounded crystal clear, and the pitch was perfect. It's not an easy song to sing, but it fits, like the lead fits Trey's vocal range really well in my opinion, and I thought they nailed it. And to me it was really obvious that they had really practiced it. This wasn't one of those kind of bust outs that they just kind of whipped up in the moment. It seemed obvious that they really rehearsed it, and it showed. I thought they nailed it. After that was Everything's Right. Great tune. There was a moment, I wrote this down. I haven't heard the show since the stream, so this could all be completely in my head. But I remember watching in between the first verse, and maybe it was the first chorus or the first verse and the second verse, there was a little bit of confusion between Trey and Paige. I think Trey thought Paige was going to take a solo, so Trey kind of looks at Paige, and then Paige is looking down playing, and then Paige looks at Trey, and then Trey stopped. At that point, Trey had stopped looking at Paige. So it was just kind of like a little moment. But it definitely by no means was bad. It was pretty just kind of funny. The jam started off really funky, a lot of echoplex happening by Trey, and then Paige switched to the clavinet, which was always a key ingredient for funk. I also wrote down, I don't really remember the jam, but they modulated from, I think the song's in B, and they modulated up a fourth to E. And they were kind of doing this E-A thing, which was which sounded really spontaneous and pretty beautiful. And also, Trey switched guitars in the middle of the song. And I believe he was playing Blondie, the guitar with Marley on the headstock, Marmar. as it's affectionately known among fans. And this is, again, I'm not by any means an expert on Trey's guitars, but the arch in this isn't an arch top, but the arch in Marley, like right here, it seems a little bit kind of bigger than his other guitars. And I noticed that when Trey was holding it, the way he was kind of resting his wrist on the guitar, on Marmar, it I don't want to say it looked uncomfortable, but it was just it didn't again, this totally could have been completely in my head, but even from the beginning of the set, he looked a little bit uncomfortable in terms of his posture. And when he switched guitars, I wasn't surprised. It kind of, and it sounded great. I thought the tone was pretty good, but just in terms of comfort and the way his wrist was resting on it, just kind of a thought I had. Oh yeah, and right before he switched guitars, Trey set up an ambient loop, which is great. So he set up the loop and then switched guitars, so that it's a great kind of guitar player trick. And it wasn't like a rhythmic loop where he's playing like a part that repeats. It was kind of I think he just looped the root of the jam, and by that point they were in E. There were some really pretty peaks in the jam, and the segue out of the jam back into the song sounded a little bit abrupt, but it is what it is. We are come to outlive our brains. I had a really pretty jam and had a kind of a very lilting feeling. Lilting, I can't say that word. And then they abandoned the chord progression pretty kind of early in the jam. And the chord progression from, I haven't kind of really figured it out yet, but it's I remember there's kind of a weird chord in there that is not in the key, and they abandon that, and that always kind of disappoints me because I always hope that they improvise around that for a little bit, but they didn't, but it still sounded great. Rise Come Together, good solid version, short, there's no jam really, just a Trey solo, played well. Sand, unfortunately for anyone who was streaming the show last night, the stream started cutting out during Sand for most people, so I didn't really get to hear all of it. I heard bits and pieces, and I thought it sounded really good. And of course, Sand, the obvious beach vibe, of the tune. It's kind of, you're going to hear Sand if they're in Mexico. I thought it was still a great version from what I heard. But yeah, the stream died just as it started to peak. So, and then I kept trying to refresh, and then I did hear bits and pieces, and it sounded pretty good. Set 2, Soul Planet opener. The Ocean is Love, right? And I thought this was the best version of Soul Planet I ever heard. They kind of, when the jam started, they really they abandoned that kind of fast blues vibe that the song is based in, and then they had this really cool kind of funky slow, I want to say like halftime, I don't know if it was technically halftime, but it's kind of a little bit slower, a little bit looser vibe to the jam. And it was they started the jam really confident, so it wasn't like they were kind of like sneaking into it. It sounded really very, very purposeful, and I thought the jam really went a lot of cool places. Probably the best version of Soul Planet I've ever heard. And the only thing is that they segue into Spanish Moon, the Little Feat cover right after. And the only thing is that there was kind of a brute force key change going into Spanish Moon. And one thing that Phish has been really good at, and probably better than most other bands, if not the best, is they're really good at kind of segueing into a song smoothly. But in this case, it was just Trey. It was just like, I think Spanish Moon's in C, so he just started like hammering that C on top of everyone else, and I think they were still in B from Soul Planet. So it was a little bit kind of jarring, but it was still really funky, and the pocket was still there. So Spanish Moon I thought was great. I love that song. I thought they're again also another bust out. Last time it was played was the only other time it was played on Halloween 2010, where they covered Little Feat. Big Little Feat fan, so I thought Spanish Moon was great. Of course, the being on a beach in Mexico at night kind of makes sense. There's no jam in Spanish Moon, but Page's organ solo was pretty dope. I always wanted it this way. After that, awesome Page tune. I believe that's on Big Boat. And the jam in that was, from what I remember, was awesome. It was really, really good. They switched. I'm not sure what key it's originally in, but I know I didn't have my guitar with me when I was watching the stream, but they were definitely in B flat major at one point, and it sounded really. It was just a gorgeous jam, and it's a really cool tune and very different from anything that I think Phish has written. It definitely, because it's a Page tune, and Page's got that kind of synthy part in it that gives it that ravey kind of feeling. It's got like this Vita Blue kind of vibe, and I don't think it's a Vita Blue song. You can correct me if I'm wrong. I think I've heard everything that Vita Blue's ever released, but I'm pretty sure that was a Page original written a few years ago for Big Boat. And one of you guys can correct me if I'm wrong. And yeah, and then that jam in I Always Wanted It That Way, some massive peaks in there, and it was one of those songs where they just kind of kept peaking and peaking and peaking. And one thing I remember is Chris Kuroda, like he did like the big white light wash during one of the peaks, and the band kept peaking, and he didn't really have anywhere else to go after that. So I think at one point just kind of like left the big white lights on, because the jam just kind of kept peaking and getting more intense and intense. But it still sounded great. And Trey was using like a dotted eighth kind of delay at one point, which is like a regular delay. We'll like have like a bump, but the Echoplex has different rhythms that he can use, like bump, ba bump, ba bump, ba bump, like that. And there's a bunch of different settings, and I think those kind of delay sounds are way more interesting than just like a regular quarter note or an eighth note, and he was using that a lot. And there was a really nice segue into the next tune, Death Don't Hurt Very Long, which is a great Casbah Vax tune. It's so simple and fun, and it's weird because this song kind of has a dark vibe, but it's still very lighthearted, so it's kind of very, very fishy in the best way. After that was 2001, and from what I remember, I think they segued into 2001. I can't quite remember. Oh, and let me backtrack. I Always Wanted It That Way hit the 20-minute mark, and it was one of those jams that to me at least, it didn't feel like it was that long. It felt like it was like when it was over, it was like, oh, it didn't. When I looked at the timestamps this morning, I was really surprised that it hit 20 minutes. It definitely didn't feel that long. I guess that just goes to show how good it was, in my opinion. 2001, it started a little bit faster than normal. I think probably like 5 or 6 BPM faster than, or maybe even 10 than what I'm used to hearing. But it's one of my absolute favorite Phish songs, and it's one that if they played 2001 for an entire set, I think I would have loved it. And just Phish's groove, the boom boom that combined with Mike's groove on the bass, not Mike's groove, the song. Phish's part combined with Mike's, I could just hear that all day. It's so good, and their pocket is just so deep on it. I could listen to it absolutely all day. And there was, in 2001, there were some Death Don't Hurt teases from Trey in the very beginning, which is pretty cool. And there was at one point, Kuroda, he like stuttered the lights. I don't know how to quite describe it, but it was really like when I was watching it, it almost gave me motion sickness because I had my screen pretty close to my face because I'm blind. But at one point he started stuttering the lights, and and the crowd started going nuts because it was a really cool effect. Not an effect I think I've seen. The last Phish show I saw was Albany this past fall, 2018, and I don't remember seeing that effect. But it was really cool. There was also, there's a part in 2001 where Phish and Mike basically drop out, and it's just Page and Trey for a little bit. Which is pretty cool. And I thought the song was going to end there, and thankfully it didn't. They kept kind of going. So in 2001 also, there was a little Type 2 section where Trey kind of improvised a new chord progression. I wish I had my guitar with me at the time, because I could have probably figured it out. But it sounded really good, which is pretty cool. And anytime 2001 goes Type 2, I'm a huge fan. And also there's this moment where, so in 2001, right before Trey goes into the head, into the dun, 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 and right before he goes into the actual melody of the song, where he usually does a pick slide, where he takes the edge of his pick. I don't know if you can hear it on my So he takes the edge of his pick and goes a trick that was it's been around for a long time. I think Eddie Van Halen did it. He turned it into an art. Eddie did, but Trey does it during 2001 to kind of signal that he's going into the melody. And when he went into it this time, the first time, he didn't do the pick slide. He just went right into the I don't remember what key it's in. I think it's in C. So it's like right before he went into that, he didn't give the pick slide, but Kuroda was right there. And from what I know about him and the lights, he has to, it's not like he just presses a button and the light happens and the light kind of, the effect, whatever effect he wants shows up. He has to anticipate it a little bit in advance because there's that delay between when he hits the buttons on the light rig and when it actually appears on stage. So he has to really anticipate what Trey's about to do. And from what I remember, he did it. It looked perfect. I guess that's what happens when you're Chris Kuroda and you are a magician in what you do. But the rest of the song was really well played. Trey also at one point did the Hadron Collider in 2001. So if you've seen, I don't remember what video I talked about that in, but it's one of my favorite Trey effects, super psychedelic, and he did that in 2001. It sounded ridiculously good. After that, Gin sounded awesome. The song itself was standard. The jam I thought was exceptional. It was really kind of powerful and blissed out from the very beginning. And at one point, Trey plays this melody that I hear a lot these days, something like. If you've heard Phish in the last few years, that melody probably sounds familiar to you. I don't think it's a part of a composed song or a teaser or anything. It's just this melody that kind of pops up over and over. And he played it in Gin. I feel like I hear that all the time. Not in a bad way. It's just something that popped out at me. Phish, incredible drum work by him. All night, I thought he was absolutely on fire. He sounded, I feel like I've never seen a show where I thought Phish was below anything other than exceptional, but especially last night, I thought he absolutely killed it. And during Gin, I remember his drum work sounded out of control. And so overall, Gin was awesome, really well played. But Trey kind of ripcorded it, in my opinion, when it still had places to go. I feel like there was a lot of room for growth in that song, in that jam. And it's felt like they kind of had the rug pulled out from under them. But they played Coil right after, and I think Coil is a complete masterpiece. That's one song that I will, if they could play it every show, and I'd be happy because it's one of my favorite Phish tunes, and it's just a perfect composition. And the Page solo at the end, or if Mike decides to solo, which sometimes he does now, it was beautiful. I thought it was a great version, and the Page solo was beautiful, and he just absolutely killed it. After they finish the song and before the Page solo, they kind of jam as a group together. And my only wish is that they would stretch that out a little more, because Squirming Coil, those last three chords, I can't remember what it is. Kind of out of tune. So F, C, G. It's a 3-bar repeating phrase, which is not something that's really easy to, even though the chords themselves may be easy, most progressions have an even amount of an even amount of measures. And this one has an odd amount. So it's 3 measures, 1 bar of F, 1 bar of C, 1 bar of G, I believe. And to improvise on a 3-bar repeating groove like that is not something that's very common. And I wish they would improvise as a group a little bit longer before they go into the Page solo, because it's the way they did it last night. I thought it was beautiful, but it always feels a little too short. But Page's solo at the end was awesome. Excuse me. Then we get into the encore. Waste was the first tune of the encore. That was good, pretty standard. Then Bold as Love, one of my absolute favorite Page tunes. I know it's a Hendrix song, but in terms of the songs that he sings, Page I get chills every time he sings it. I don't think I've ever heard a version of Bold as Love where I didn't immediately get chills, because I think Page, he just really belts his heart out on that one, and he sings it with so much passion and emotion. And in the first solo of Bold as Love, Trey kind of lost his footing a couple times, but he made up for it by finishing really strong. And then the unison bends on the second solo, like the kind of like the, I don't remember. I haven't played Bold as Love in a long time, but he nailed that really well. And that was it. All right, cool, guys. I got to go. But I'm looking forward to, hopefully I'll get to stream tonight also. But for all of you guys who are in Mexico, I hope you have an awesome time. And for everyone else, I'll see you guys online. Take care.